Welcome back to the Deep Discog Dive. I got knocked down and I have no idea what the hell I'm supposed to do now. Well, while I'm down here, I might as well listen to some 90s one-hit wonders. And how are we gonna pay for that? Today, we're talking about Chumbawamba. Let's dive in. Our tub thumping begins in Burnley, Lancashire in the early 1980s. Two teen boys, Boff Wally and Danbert No Bacon, met as bands like the Sex Pistols and The Clash were pioneering punk rock. Along with two other friends, Midge and Tommy, they jokingly formed their own band called Chimp Eats Banana. They played a few gigs in the area despite not knowing how to play instruments, and as they went off to university, they spent time attending shows and busking in cities like Paris. While they were in Paris, they caught some North African drummers chanting Chum Chumbawamba. Once they all settled in Leeds, they took a new name as Chumbawamba, which turned into the snappier Chumbawamba. In Leeds, they immersed themselves in the music of acts like Crass, who displayed how punk and performance art could thrive together. While they lost Midge and Tommy as members, they added new members Lou Watts, Harry Hamer, Mavis Dillon, Dunstan Bruce, and Alice Nutter. And they even moved in together into their own commune. That's right, Chumbawamba had a hype house. Early Chumbawamba shows were your expected 80s punk fare, but as time went on, two things would set them apart from their contemporaries, one internal and one external. The first was them starting to bring humor into their music. While other bands of the time were overtly serious, Chumbawamba were more willing to take the piss in their music and even other people's music. As an example, one of their first recordings was a parody of Oi, a subgenre of punk favored by skinheads and white nationalists. The parody, which was them yelling "I'm thick" over and over again, was so convincing that it got them featured on an Oi compilation. The second was the UK miners' strike of 1984 and 1985. After the UK government announced the shutdown of 20,000 mining locations, miners went on strike for well over a year. As each member was from a middle-class background, Chumbawamba were very much against the closings. This event gave them a strong political foundation and a hatred towards the conservative UK government and its leader at the time, Margaret Thatcher. At this point, I want to reconfirm, this is still the band that will go on to make the song about getting knocked down and then getting back up again. Chumbawamba's beginnings were deeply entrenched in anarchist politics, and that will not change as we continue on. Their politics are as integral to their music as police violence is to Run the Jewels, or bags of flour are to Pusha T. The first official Chumbawamba release was the Revolution 7-inch single, released on vinyl no less, which was considered a tasteless sellout move by the punk community, who kept their releases to the pure release format of the cassettes. And in May 1986, Chumbawamba released their first album, Pictures of Starving Children Sell Records. Okay, this needs a bit of context. As they were working on their debut, the Live Aid concert was announced. You know, that big 1985 concert held to support Ethiopia during a terrible famine. There were performances by Paul McCartney, David Bowie, Elton John. It's where that one really famous Queen performance happened. Anyway, Chumbawamba did not like Live Aid. They thought it was a bunch of useless self-aggrandizing, meant only to let those involved tell the world how great they are and help them, well, sell records. So album number Chumba 1 starts out as a satirizing of Live Aid, and it does not hold anything back. The opener, How to Get Your Band on Television, takes 3 minutes to get into the actual song, but once it does, it directly calls out Paul McCartney, David Bowie, Freddie Mercury. With Paul specifically, they sing, "Make of Ethiopia a fertile paradise, where everyone sings Beatles songs and writes shares in EMI." By the way, that song and many of the others I bring up will be in a playlist, linked in the description. The rest of the songs aren't specifically about Live Aid, but they do tackle the general state of media and capitalism. British colonialism and the BBC blasts manipulation by the news, Unilever and the twofer of Coca-Colonization, and in a nutshell, bash large corporations, and Beginning to Take It Back briefly looks at the Nicaraguan Revolution. But while the lyrics can feel like a sledgehammer, the production usually doesn't. It sounds like punk in that the tempos are frantic, the performances are loud, the singers scream, great examples being Invasion and Dutiful Servants and Political Masters, but everything sounds clean, and the instrumentation incorporates bongos, organs, trumpets, accordions, synths. It's a surprisingly diverse sounding album. The only thing that might keep you from really enjoying this album is its politics if you disagree with them, or even just get annoyed by them quickly. But as a debut for both their music and ideology, it succeeds. Pictures of Starving Children was received well by the band's existing fanbase, and it helped kick off a European tour with Dutch band The X. Chumbawamba's second record, Nevermind the Ballots, was released in May 1987. As its title might give away, their focus this time went broader to take aim at the UK voting process, just as the general election was approaching, and as you might imagine, they held as much resentment towards the UK government as they did towards Bob Geldof. Ballots is definitely more conventional sounding punk fare. The deviations from that genre are still there, but they appear sporadically. Instead, this lets the core performances of the band shine through. In particular, the bass lines on this can be excellent, like on Amen, opener Always Tell the Voters What They Want to Hear, and the candidates find common ground. If there's one standout song to be found on here, it's the closer Here's the Rest of Your Life, a 13-minute display of tension building as piano, electric guitar, and vocals both sung and screamed bounce back and forth, all underpinned with an ominous bass line. While it's still a good display of Chumbawamba's spirit, their energy this time is far more negative, and without the satirical approach and variety of instruments from their debut, their vitriol towards UK elections can wear thin. This is the sort of complaint that's sometimes levied against Chumbawamba's discography as a whole. If it doesn't click for you, then the bashing and trashing of systemic forces can feel monotonous and never-ending. Anyway, Nevermind the Ballots is a good album for the time, but not a crucial listen these days. Also, I didn't realize this until editing, but if you were thinking of listening to it, Nevermind the Ballots is not on Spotify for some weird reason. It is on Apple Music and Tidal, which is what I primarily use. It's also here on YouTube. I've left a link to it in the description. I wonder if that'll be the last time I say that in this video. Just kidding, I know if I do. I'm Editor Mike. I'm a god! Keeping in line with their decentralized anarchist roots, Chumbawamba started holding all-hands meetings where they voted collectively to determine any future moves. It was from one of those meetings that the idea for their third album came about, English Rebel Songs 1381 to 1914, released in 1988. Oh, that's gotta be a tongue-in-cheek title, right?
Will you do that, said Milda to Malda? Oh, we may not tell you.
So English Rebel Songs 1381 to 1914 is exactly that, traditional English songs of protest written between 1381 and 1914. Lou and Boff had been going to more folk shows, and they inspired the band to bring in more musical influences, lest they be typecast as a bunch of blokes with loud instruments yelling about the government. Now you might think at first this was just the band trying to flex their working class bona fides. Oh, you support the working class? Name 3 traditional protest songs. But while it's straightforward in concept, it's well done in execution. The Diggers song refers to a group of agrarian socialists fighting to create egalitarian farming communities in the 1600s. The Triumph of General Ludd is about a Luddite Robin Hood-esque figure. Poverty Knock details the conditions of working in cloth mills. And aside from the mill noises on Poverty Knock and percussion on Smashing of the Van, the whole album is performed in simplistic but effective a cappella. Should you listen to this? Maybe. It's a unique experiment to be sure. However, what's really important here is that this was the first time the band really played with vocal harmonies, a musical element that will become a core fixture of their songwriting from here on out. So it was essential to their artistic growth, but it's not essential to your ears. English Rebel Songs may have been a surprise to the public, but it wasn't as it pertained to Chumbawamba's ever-evolving ethos. They had spent the past 5 years integrating themselves into left-wing spaces, attending protests, and carving their own people-pointed approach to punk. So where were the people in the late 80s? Well, they were at raves. Techno and acid house were sweeping over the UK, and the band found themselves drawn to the community just as they had been to punk in the early 80s. As work began on their fourth album, Chumbawamba decided to bring in elements from dance music, but they also decided to change how they wrote lyrics. You see, up to this point, the band wrote songs about the system, but following English Rebel Songs, they changed their focus to the individual, the regular people who did meaningful work despite the system. That mindset change is crucial to how Chumbawamba will develop over the course of this new decade. It's also the first inkling of a very major change that we will get to soon. But they did get one last stick into the man with the EMI EP in 1989, and in 1990, Chumbawamba released the first album in their new direction, Slap! Ow! The sound of Slap is a it's like someone is hitting you in the face with like the palm of their hand. There's a word for that, right? While the elements of past Chumbawamba records are here, they're used sparingly in favor of dance beats and processed samples. And it all sounds okay. I mean, it's all well made, it just sounds dated. That's not a real fault of the record though, it's just the unavoidable passage of time. If there's one part of the production I can praise, it's the trumpets. Trumpets are going to be a huge part of Chumbawamba's sound from here on out. I'd argue it's the instrument that will set them apart the most from their peers. Speaking of being set apart, Slap starts a Chumba trend that will continue for basically the rest of their history. Most of the songs on here are stories, inspired by real historical events. Rubens Has Been Shot depicts a fight between German workers and military in a gallery, leading to a painting being damaged. Said painting was mourned over more than the workers who were killed. Wow, property being more valued than people? What an unrealistic song. Opener Ulrike is about the founder of the Red Army faction in Germany, complete with a random Elvis Presley sample. Rappaport's Testament, I Never Gave Up, is about Nazi concentration camps, and That's How Grateful We Are is a great general depiction of the working class struggle in the face of oppressive businesses. As a whole, Slap is a good first step in this new dance-infused direction for Chumbawamba. It's well worth checking out on your preferred streaming service.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I'm assuming it's because of the samples, but Slap is, as of right now, not on any streaming service. If you want to check it out, it is on YouTube. Links in the description. Feeling inspired by this new direction, Chumbawamba began work on a new album soon after Slap. This new record would be heavily based on samples of songs from ABBA, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones. It would effectively be their Paul's Boutique, their postmodern collage, reimagining rock music. That album was Jesus H. Christ, and you have probably never heard it because it was never officially released. Too many of the samples were denied clearance, so the whole album had to be reworked. That said, there is a rip of it here on YouTube. Link is below the like button. So the band went back to the drawing board and retooled what they had. Though with this go-around, the concept of censorship was fresh on their minds. Gee, I wonder why. In 1991, Chumbawamba released Shhh. Fun fact, in the CD liner booklet, they included letters from labels rejecting their sample clearances. Nice. Speaking of nice, the title track is so good! The earworm chorus lays out the thematic undercurrent of censorship, and the guitars sound so crisp and crunchy. This might be their best opener since Pictures of Starving Children. Sometimes Plunder goes after the Beatles and Rolling Stones for their quote-unquote borrowing from Black American music, while the band borrows the hook from Slap's Ulrike. Big Mouth Strikes Again recounts comedian Lenny Bruce's obscenity trial in the 60s. It also has a rap verse. There's rapping on a few songs here, courtesy of MC Fusion from UK rap group Credit to the Nation. And the closer Stitch That brings in a sample of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Yeah, I know, out of all the samples they had originally planned, the Beatles one got to stay. While I prefer the stories being told on Slap, I think the production on Shhh is better and more engaging overall. Regardless, they're both good albums that show how easily Chumbawamba could adapt to dance music. They're also both not on streaming. Man, it's a bummer that these two aren't more easily available. But once again, the full album is on YouTube. Link is under the subscribe button. Both Slap and Shhh became popular in Europe, though not without upsetting punk purists, especially in the US, where Chumbawamba were finally starting to tour. At one point, they were called Bee Gees music. As a bad thing, but still their profile continued to expand, and they signed a new deal with One Little Indian Records, the same label as Björk. In April 1994, Chumbawamba let Anarchy loose into the world. Hey, that's a very nice cover. I bet that's the original and not a substitute for a more controversial cover. Oh! Good! The original cover depicts the miracle of childbirth, and said miracle got the record banned in some stores. Which is unfortunate, because this record is really good. Give the Anarchist a Cigarette is a great way to kick off the album, one of the best chorus hooks the band has written so far. Time Bomb interpolates Buffalo Springfield's For What It's Worth. Georgina sounds like their take on a 50s high school slow dance. Rage is half beautiful, intimate closer, and half cheesy TV show intro, calling back to Time Bomb. Not to mention, these blokes were getting really good at choruses. The opener, Mouthful of Shit, Love Me, they could honestly fit on pop radio. Oh, don't mind me, I'm just shadowing my 4. In total, Anarchy is great. Good pacing, excellent hooks, diverse production. This is Chumbawamba's best album so far. Later in 1994, the band released their first live album, Show Business. It's mostly cuts from the past 3 albums, but worth highlighting are 2 fan-favorite B-sides from past singles, Morality and The Day the Nazi Died. The next year, in October 1995, Chumbawamba went swingin' with Raymond. Man, he never invites me out anymore. The format for this one is interesting. Side 1 is the Love It half, with songs that focus on the general concept of love of things, love of ideas, etc. It's a fairly strong pivot lyrically, but it's a massive massive shift sonically. It's folk music, guitars, harmonica, light violins, and the shift mostly pays off. The new instrumentation gives the hooks on This Girl and The Morning After space to stick in your head. It also gives Lou Watts a chance to shine as she sings lead vocals for all of these songs. Side 2 is the Hate It half, reserved for the more typical political punk fare. Lead single Ugh Your Ugly Houses is the highlight on this half for sure. It's the band doing basically ska, which is a look that suits them pretty well. Other highlights include This Dress Kills with Alice Nutter giving a great lead vocal performance, and Salome. But even though there are tracks I enjoy, I can't say I loved Swingin' with Raymond as a whole. Each side gets dull by the end, and I kinda wish the love and hate songs were weaved together, which I know goes against the whole point of the record, but hey, maybe that says something about the point of the record. If anything, Swingin' with Raymond is best remembered as that last bit of experimentation before the band truly reached their peak. These were the songs that remind you of the good times, but these next songs, they're gonna remind you of the better times. Swingin' with Raymond was well received, but it was also the first time a Chumbawamba record sold less than the one before. It got the band doubting themselves, so they sat down and chose to give the next record their all. The band finished this album, One Little Indian received it, and they rejected it. They felt the album leaned way too far into pop and dance music. But in 1996, backstage at a gig, they got an offer from a new label for £100,000, and in 1997, Chumbawamba signed to EMI. Huh. Okay, now that news might take you by surprise. Chumbawamba were intensely against major labels, and EMI in particular. They had that one EP that had the F word and EMI and no other words. So you might be wondering, how did people react to this news? Chumbawamba's fans did not take the news well. Accusations of selling out and abandoning their fans were thrown wildly like a food fight at the Roxy. There was even an anti-Chumbawamba EP made by English punk bands called Barefaced Hypocrisy Sells Records. The band did make a statement about the signing, which boiled down to, every label is out to get money, we can't run from the oppressive veil of capitalism, and we might as well try to promote our messages on a bigger stage. Also, EMI doesn't work with arms dealers anymore. While you may think the signing was hypocritical, that explanation fits well with their actions over the past few years, I think, in my opinion. Chumbawamba had tried to espouse their ideology to more and more people, so why not do it with one of the biggest labels in the world? In September 1997, Chumbawamba released Tubthumper. So the Anarchy cover was too much, but this wasn't? Okay, it's been enough time. We've finally gotten to the song you know this band for. Let's talk about Tubthumper's opening track, Tub Thumping. I get knocked down, but I get up again. You're never gonna keep me down. It's somewhat poetic that Chumbawamba, the explicitly political band, became popular and will likely be remembered for a song that comes off as so non-political. But I hate to betray your trust, Conrad, because tub thumping is also political! You just got Chumbawamba. I mean, the title itself is a slang term for political sloganeering, and the message of uplifting the working class is there once you look for it. But still, for the first time ever, the political ideology of Chumbawamba is not slapping you in the face. It's totally possible to enjoy this song as a good-hearted ode to making your way through life with a bit where they sing Danny Boy out of nowhere. And get this, because this is crazy. There's also an entire album to go along with it. Of course, the album is always going to have an albatross around its neck with the face of that demon baby, but the rest of Tubthumper continues the dance punk that the band more or less locked down on Anarchy. Amnesia is technically the band's other big hit, at least in the UK, and it's a good time. Insanely catchy chorus on this one. Drip 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 lampoons landlords with, once again, a great chorus supplemented by trumpets. The Good Ship Lifestyle alternates between verses with skittering breakbeats and a full-blown rock chorus, all while dragging people who champion political ideals without living them. Small Town is the most electronic song on here, adding trance synths to the aforementioned breakbeats. Also, it's not on the main album, but it's worth mentioning Top of the World Ole Ole Ole. This one could reasonably be called their third actual hit next to Tub Thumping and Amnesia. It was heavily used during the 1998 World Cup. If there's one thing that holds Tubthumper back to me, it's the album's one-track mind. Whereas Anarchy managed to keep sounding fresh, Tubthumper pretty much locks into its sonic groove and rarely deviates, and at 55 minutes long, it gets very close to wearing out its welcome. But still, Tubthumper is more than fine as a major label debut, and it gave Chumbawamba a hit song that would outlive them all. Would you be surprised to learn that Tubthumper was the biggest success of Chumbawamba's career? Tub Thumping became one of the defining songs of the late 90s, and the album went on to sell over 3 million copies. It's probably because of that song that Tubthumper was a big hit. Imagine someone picking this up at their Virgin Records store for the funny song about pissing the night away, and then getting an album of postmodern anarchist dance rock. You might think the major label move would dilute Chumbawamba's prankster ethos, but whoo boy would you be wrong. Let's run down the list. They opened the 1998 Brit Awards with Tub Thumping, but changed the lyrics to bash the UK government.
You Labour sold out the Dockers, just like we sell out the rest of us!
There was also what happened during Fleetwood Mac's performance. Danbert went up to UK official John Prescott with a bucket of ice and dumped it on his head. Alice Nutter went on Bill Maher's old ABC show and said that fans who couldn't afford to buy Tubthumper should shoplift it. Now, keep in mind, this was before Napster took off, so buying CDs was still the only real way to get music. Suffice it to say, music retailers did not like that one bit. Virgin Records took the record off shelves but allowed you to purchase it if you asked at the counter, and other stores just took it away entirely. They played on Letterman, and for the last chorus, they chanted, "Free Mumia! Abu Jamal!" For context, Mumia was arrested and sentenced to death for the murder of a police officer. Up until his release in 2001, he was a major figure in the debates over the death sentence and the unjust nature of the American justice system. Make fun of Chumbawamba for all you want, but they certainly made good with their time in the spotlight. So what was up next on the musical side? In 1998, they released Uneasy Listening, their first greatest hits compilation, a pretty good collection from all the past albums, along with some one-off singles. 1999 saw the release of the ABCs of Anarchism, a collaborative EP with San Francisco-based experimental group Negativland. It's somewhere between Musique Concrète and YouTube Poop, with samples taken from the Spice Girls, Chic, and Chumbawamba themselves. I can't say it's good or that you should check it out, but it's certainly a memorable way to spend a half hour. They also added 2 new full-time members, Neil Ferguson and Jude Abbott, and at some point in 2000, they released a whole dang documentary called Well Done, Now Sod Off. It's a nice time, with interviews from the band, label reps, and journalists. The full thing is on YouTube, link is, I don't know, under the clip button. In April 2000, Chumbawamba dropped their follow-up to Tubthumper, What You See Is What You Get. Oh, what a cute dog on the cover. I bet there's nothing to the left that spoils this precious moment. So if Tubthumper's lead single was Tub Thumping, what is this album's lead single? It's... This song does not remind me of the good times, or the better times. If you thought Tub Thumping was super annoying, fine, I get it, but at least it's easy to understand why people liked singing it. The spirit of its chorus is core to us. She's Got All the Friends feels cynical and jaded by comparison. Honestly, the song is probably more remembered for its B-side, Passenger List for Doomed Flight number 1721. This song was fairly controversial at the time, but not for the reasons you might think for a song about a plane crash in the early 2000s. No, it was controversial because it names a lot of millionaires and political figures who are on this doomed flight. That negative outlook extends to the full album. What you see is that classic case when an artist gets big and reckons with their fame and what that fame means. The album opens with the raucous I'm With Stupid as the band knocks basic pop music and those who vapidly consume it. Ah, the classic move of making pop music that makes you feel bad about listening to pop music. Just like Chained to the Rhythm, the Katy Perry song that everyone loved. Sorry, I'm making it seem like I don't like this record. Even with the cynicism at full blast, I do like I'm With Stupid on a musical level, and as the record progresses, it starts playing more with structure and form. There's 22 tracks, but it's less than 50 minutes, and many of the songs feed into each other. The feeling is comparable to scrolling through TV channels, and the result is that very few songs overstay their welcome. Not to mention, What You See is a far more diverse album than Tubthumper. While the trumpets and electronic beats are still here on full display, the band do well bringing in new influences. Slide guitar on Social Dogma and Celebration Florida, strings on I'm Coming Out, pseudo surf rock on I'm in Trouble Again, honky tonk piano on Moses with a Gun, DJ record scratching on Ladies for Compassionate Lynching. Jesus Christ, what a title that is. There's even a harkening back to English rebel songs with New York Mining Disaster, which is, get this, a Bee Gees cover. Isn't it funny that the band who are deemed Bee Gees music would cover this song of all things? It may not have the singular hit like its predecessor, but What You See is a more diverse package than Tubthumper, and putting aside the overt pessimism in spots, it might just be a better package. But What You See didn't have that singular hit, and so it bombed. Compared to Tubthumper's 3 million copies sold, What You See has gone on to sell only 22,000. That's less than 1% of what Tubthumper sold. Suffice it to say, Chumbawamba was swiftly dropped from EMI. And maybe it was that which caused the band to license a song to a General Motors ad. Hey, look, guys, it's okay. There's no shame in taking a payday as large as $70,000. What did you spend it on? Oh! You gave it to 2 organizations to produce anti-GM campaigns. Good! Keeping with their independent spirit, Chumbawamba formed their own label, Mutt Records, and in June 2002, Readymades was made ready to the public. In a statement, the band cited Moby's play as an inspiration, as they sampled and paid homage to British folk artists. While they first thought that these artists would be resistant to being sampled, Chumbawamba were surprised to see that the folk world was very open to their experiments. This would mark the band's first proper dip into folk music, which would turn into a full-on breaststroke within a few albums. Speaking of swimming, the opener Salt Fair North Sea is a great primer for the record to follow. At first, the trance synths and reverb-drenched piano made me worried that this thing would sound very dated, but the beat is engaging enough to make up for it. Also kinda reminds me of Destroyer, which is never a bad thing. Jacob's Ladder is sick! The descending guitar line sampled from a Davy Graham song got stuck in my head almost immediately. After Shelley is built off this beautiful vocal line from folk singer Kate Rusby, Don't Try This at Home has this excellent build and arrangement. By the end, it's layering choir vocals, trumpet jabs, and a catchy refrain. I also like how All in Vain and Without Reason or Rhyme both use the same refrain in very unique ways. The former is more of a dance track, the latter is a more lushly produced ballad. But it also has a melodica, so Chumbawamba are in jail now. By the way, if you happen to go check out the record and get confused when you see 2 different versions, let me explain. They would later release an expanded version called Readymades and Then Some. At the time, it came with a DVD, but in the days of streaming, the only addition is a second version of Jacob's Ladder. The original was written about Winston Churchill, but the Not In My Name version was rewritten slightly to criticize the Iraq War. I really enjoyed Readymades. Sure, it sounds of its time these days, but the songwriting is on point enough to keep it from feeling stale. B+ out of 8. In 2003, the band re-recorded English Rebel songs with cleaner recordings, some extra instrumentation, and an additional 70 years to the time span. That re-recording is the one currently up on streaming. They also released a soundtrack for the 2003 film Revenger's Tragedy. It's a mostly instrumental soundtrack built more on the trance-like synths from Readymades. It has not aged well in my opinion, its best song was already on Readymades, let's move on. And on top of all that, Tub Thumping was remixed by the Flaming Lips. They give it a more melancholic feel, it's pretty good. Chumbawamba's next record, Un, was released in June 2004. And it's an interesting comparison to Readymades. Instead of that album's interest in folk music, Un's sonic sights are set on a larger scale. This time, the band bring influences from Latin America, Cuba, and other places in the world. It's great to see Chumbawamba expanding their palette like this. Now if I only cared for the result. Sorry, let me balance that with some nice things. The Wizard of Menlo Park is absolutely a highlight. A song about Thomas Edison, featuring the man himself singing Mary Had a Little Lamb. Love the chanting and the flute on the chorus. Everything You Know Is Wrong is a jaunty little tune about misinformation. On eBay taunts the banal consumerism brought about by online vendors like eBay and Amazon. We Don't Want to Sing Along had me regrettably singing along with its vocal harmonies and accordions. So there are highlights, but aside from them, there's not much that really stuck out to me this time. Now, I'm sure part of this could be my own fatigue, now 11 albums into Chumbawamba's catalog, hearing them sing about the same basic well-worn topics. I think it might also be that this is a transition record of sorts. The last album had clear electronic elements, and the albums after this will see the band plant their foot more firmly into folk and live band antics. This one is fine for what it is, but I don't see myself coming back to it much. Between revisiting English Rebel songs in 2003 and the smaller intimate shows they did for Un, Chumbawamba went simpler for their next album, not just in sound, but in lineup. Between Un and this next album, they lost members Harry, Dunstan, Danbert, and Alice. Not for any insidious reasons, they just left to pursue their own things. Sometime in 2005, they started offering pre-orders for an EP that would only be released under a particular circumstance, but I'll come back to that later. The band signed a new deal with No Masters Records, and in October 2005, 2005, the now 4-piece released a Singsong and A Scrap. After flirting with it for so long, Chumbawamba officially turned into Folka Wolka. Singsong and the 2 albums that will follow see them become a full-on folk band. What's more, there isn't really much of a unifying concept or theme behind this album. In the band's own words, it's, quote, for the first time, a collection of songs, pure and simple. You may be disappointed if you come to Chumbawamba for acerbic wit and unflinching societal critique, but if you're open to them doing well-written and well-performed folk songs, you're in for a fine time. Of course, that doesn't mean the band have stopped talking about society and injustice, it just comes off far more courteously. When Alexander Met Emma is about 2 Russian anarchists, but it's produced and performed like a love song. And Bank Robber is a cover of a song by The Clash, but it's performed a cappella. And while the band's melodies and hooks may not be as immediate as before, they're still rather lovely. You Can, William Francis, Fade Away, slap some 90s drums and trumpets on them, and they'd fit on Tubthumper or Anarchy. A Singsong and A Scrap is a good pivot to folk for Chumbawamba. In a weird way, it seems like they've truly reached their final sonic form here. Music that feels communal and welcoming to all with good in their hearts. We got a second Chumbawamba live album in 2006 called Get On With It. This time the setlist is stacked with tracks mostly from Singsong, though it's also nice to hear acoustic renditions of tracks like Time Bomb and Homophobia, plus a reworked version of Stitch That from Shhh. The band also added longtime collaborator Phil Moody as an official member. In March 2008, Chumbawamba released The boy bands have won, and all the copyists and the tribute bands and the TV talent show producers have won, if we allow our culture to be shaped by mimicry, whether from lack of ideas or from exaggerated respect. You should never try to freeze culture. What you can do is recycle that culture. Take your older brother's hand-me-down jacket and restyle it. Refashion it to the point where it becomes your own. But don't just regurgitate creative history or hold art and music and literature as fixed, untouchable, and kept under glass. The people who try to guard any particular form of music are, like the copyists and manufactured bands, doing it the worst disservice, because the only thing that you can do to music that will damage it is not change it, not make it your own, because then it dies, then it's over, then it's done, and the boy bands have won. Why yes, that is the world record for longest album title. Once again, Chumbawamba burrow further into the folk genre, and production-wise, it's pretty similar to Singsong, so if you like that album, you'll like this one. But that doesn't mean the band have stopped bringing in new inspiration. What they took inspiration from this time was, apparently, what you see is what you get. Just like that album, Boy Bands is structured with many short songs that feed into each other. Unlike What You See's Television Feel, Boy Bands feels more like a songbook being passed down from one generation to another. They also returned to sampling on this album. Sampling themselves. The Chumba canon was dense enough now for the band to interpolate some of their old songs, and it's a neat reward for anyone who's been following them up to this point. The way Fade Away takes on a more melancholic feel at the end of Refugee, or how Rappaport's Testament weaves into the jazz lounge Fine Line. Lyrically, some of that Chumba bite comes back this time. The second track, Add Me, paints a pretty negative picture of social networking sites. And sure, these days it comes off as a bit ham-fisted, but the idea of random Nazi weirdos skulking the internet? Look, that hasn't aged poorly, that's all I'm saying. An album standout, El Fusilado, tells the story of a Mexican revolutionary who was shot several times and lived to tell the tale. I love the production too, sounds like an impromptu bar sing-along. The Boy Bands Have Won is another good folk record by Chumbawamba. There's enough new to keep it from feeling stagnant, and to keep Singsong from feeling like a fluke. The only thing of note that happened between Boy Bands and the next record was Chumbawamba putting on a stage production in late 2009 called Riot, Rebellion, and Bloody Insurrection. It was a musical comedy about the Luddite Rebellion in early 1800s Britain. Got decent reviews from what I've seen. In March 2010, Chumbawamba released ABCDEFG. No, this is not their pivot into anarchist children's music. The title is actually a reference to music notes. And as the first proper track Voices That's All lays out, the lyrical focus this time is music, and stories of people being uplifted by music. Wagner at the Opera tells the story of a concentration camp survivor disrupting a performance of works by Wagner, a raging anti-Semite. I love the production on this. Vocal harmonies carry the track and are joined by stomping and a loud whistle. It really makes you feel like you're watching this person disrupt the show. The Devil's Interval is about the dreaded tritone. Rat-a-tat-tay is about a musician scaring off robbers by performing the Ursonate, a sound poem. Yeah, I'd probably run too. But if there's one song that is guaranteed to catch your eye, it's Torturing James Hetfield. What's that about? So James Hetfield, lead singer of Metallica, once voiced his approval for the band's music being used for torture at Guantanamo Bay, though there are conflicting reports that say the band urged the military to not use their music. Anyway, in response, Chumbawamba wrote a song where James Hetfield is tortured with Chumbawamba's own greatest hits record. And if that wasn't enough, the song itself sounds like an old Tin Pan Alley rag. I am frankly speechless. For the third time in a row, Chumbawamba dropped another solid folk album. However, it would also end up being the end of the bar line for them.
Just our voices, that's all.
If Chumbawamba was suffering from kidney failure, would you donate all of your kidneys to keep them alive?
In July 2012, Chumbawamba announced that they were Chumbadunba. In their statement, they said it wasn't due to any drama, they just felt like it was time to call it after 30 years. They played their final show with all original members in December 2012, and ABCDEFG became their final release. Or wait a minute. No, it wasn't! So ABCDEFG was chronologically their last album to be recorded, but do you remember that EP they made in the 2000s that would only be released under a certain circumstance? That certain circumstance was Margaret Thatcher's death, and when she passed in 2013, Chumbawamba released In Memoriam Margaret Thatcher, one last tell-off to the woman who, in some part, inspired them to make music. Since their breakup, the individual Chumba mates have all been doing their own thing. Boff has written books, done some fell running, and written books about fell running. Danbert has continued to release solo music. Dunstan Bruce has been working in documentary filmmaking. In fact, he showed his own film about Chumbawamba at this year's South by Southwest. It's called I Get Knocked Down, and it'll hopefully get released sometime soon. Perhaps most unexpected is Alice Nutter's post-Wumba career. After leaving Chumbawamba, she got into writing for the stage and for television. You might know her work best from the FX limited series Trust, about the kidnapping of John Paul Getty III. It starred Donald Sutherland, Hilary Swank, and cowboy Brendan Fraser. That's one hell of a domino effect, isn't it? The UK miners' strike of the 80s eventually led us to cowboy Brendan Fraser. So, was Chumbawamba successful in seeding their anarchist ideology into the mainstream? No, I don't think so. I mean, before today, what did you know this band more for? Their anarchist background or the tub-thumping gorilla? And yes, tub-thumping has anarchist ideas, but they are by no means on the surface. To most people, it's either the fun song about never being kept down, or it's an ear-grating pile of trash that should have stayed in the 90s like Crystal Pepsi. But even if they didn't succeed on the political front, they did give us a working-class sing-along anthem that we may possibly hear for the rest of our lives. How many other bands can say that? Man, I'm really glad I checked Chumbawamba out. Their discography might be the most unexpectedly diverse I've ever covered on this series. If you want to get into Chumbawamba, I mean, Tubthumper would probably be a good place to start just for the song. Beyond that, the records I enjoyed the most were Pictures of Starving Children, Shhh, Anarchy, What You See Is What You Get, Readymades, and The Boy Bands Have Won. And if you enjoy stories of punk bands balancing their core artistic ideals with commercial success, then you might enjoy this deep discog dive on Green Day.